Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is about this Edelbrock Perfomer RPM 440 aluminum Chrysler head, and I'm going to flow it and I'll do a little product review as well. But before I do that, I want to talk about a few things just because I think it's kind of important and I just want to bring it up. First off, I've been getting a lot of phone calls, and I realize whenever you call, I probably sound like a jerk. And let me explain why I probably sound that way, but I just want to get this out in front because I think it needs to be said. You guys aren't doing anything wrong, you just don't know. Here's what's happening. People will call constantly, which is fine, but they'll ask for cylinder head recommendations, also fine, and other things as well. And we'll go through this long list, and they're trying to ask what product I sell that would make the most sense for what they're doing, and I would go through all of that, and then they would say, well, what's your lead time? And I won't tell a lead time because the way these videos come out is like it could be a year from now and it could be different. But I'll say it's long. And so anyway, 10-minute conversation. At the end, they'll ask what the lead time is. And then inevitably, this happens almost every time. Probably, I'd say 7 out of 10 times this happens. Whoa, that long? Well, good for you, which it is good for me. I don't prefer to have wait times this long. This is a little ridiculous. But like, wow, I just can't work with that. And I understand, I really do. Because if you're trying to race and you didn't pay attention to anything else about a supply chain issues, I could see why this would be news to you. But, and everyone's like, I can't wait that long. And then they just let go. So in fact, I've wasted, and I wouldn't say wasted, but it went through 10 minutes of time to explain that how long the wait time is. So here lately, probably the last 3 weeks, what I've started doing as soon as you guys call and like, hey, I want to get a cylinder head recommendation, I go, let me interrupt you. Do you have this long to wait? And it sounds like I'm being rude, and I understand that if I was hearing that, I would say that too. But here's the thing, I'm really not trying to be rude. I just don't want to waste your time or mine, because some of you might be on your lunch break or whatever else, and you don't want to wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes going through your combination so I can pick the best thing just to figure out, I can't wait that long. And so then the next question usually gets asked, do you have anything out of the box? I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys this because I'm hoping some people it reaches some of you, because it's been going on for a long time and I'm surprised I still get calls. It's a 5-month wait to get any heads from any manufacturer unless they're made in China, with the small exception of some profiler heads from a warehouse. Profilers, usually it's hit and miss. I can usually get those relatively quicker. Any others besides Chinese, 4 to 5 months, easy. And you're like, what manufacturers? AFR, they told me 5 months, they told me May. Brodix, I just got in a set of oval port heads that I ordered in September. So if you think it's, you should have inventory. There's no way to, how? If I ordered months ago, I wouldn't have it now. It's unreal. I want you guys just to understand that, just because I don't want to waste your time, and I'm not trying to waste my time, and I'm really not trying to be rude. That's the only thing I'm trying to get at. So just thought I'd let you know that. I appreciate every one of you, and you all are great, and you build up this channel. I just give you information, but without you guys' viewership, this really wouldn't be as big as it is, and I appreciate that. But I want you to know when you call, I do value you, but I also value your time too. So just let that be aware. Anyway, let's get talking about this head, because I know that's really what you watched. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, this is an Edelbrock Perfomer RPM 440 head. A customer set this in. All I'm going to get to do on that, so you will get to see a little bit before and after stuff, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a valve job and blend the stuff in, and that's about it. Nothing too crazy, just mild stuff. Of course, freshen it up and everything, so it's good to go. So, but this is how that came in. Now, if you watch my review of the 440 source head, I have the same complaint with this head. Edelbrock, when they make this head, why in the world did you pick that chamber? I know you're like, well, that's a 906 or close to whatever the head that they have from the factory. That's what that chamber is. Why? You need to be better. If you're making an aftermarket casting, you should make a better design chamber. It just should be. So I'm not a fan of this chamber, and the reason why is you have no divergent zone on this thing. It's just flat. You've killed part of your quench pad, which you're like, so, well, the quench builds torque. We're like, well, these make torque too. Well, they make torque because their ports are so small. If they made a modern design chamber, brought the quench pad down, made it more of a heart design, you're going to make more torque and horsepower. It just will happen. But this is what they have. Now, I actually think this head's been out of date anyway, because the part number at the top says 6091, and I went to Jegs to see if they had it, and they don't have this one. I think they moved on to something different. So maybe they've more modernized design, but straight off, I don't like the chamber. So just being honest about that. Matter of fact, it looks exactly like the 440 source one, almost as if the 440 source copied this one. So anyway, there's that. Here's the other thing. Now, I did have my helper reface the valves, but I want you to understand, these don't have a back cut. These came directly out and do not have a back cut. And let me get real quick, stop the video and get another valve so I can show you what a back cut is. Okay, here's another valve just to show you. So this is the valve that came out, except for it's been refaced. Now I'm going to point that out just because any Edelbrock head I've ever had, they're the same way. They come with no back cut. You don't need one on the exhaust because it actually makes things worse for reversion. For the intake you do. This is a back cut. This right here is the seat angle. This is a different valve. This is the seat angle. This is what actually sits right here on the seat. This part right here is the back angle, or back cut. This valve doesn't have it from the factory. It will when I'm done. That's why the afterflow numbers will make a difference. And I say, well, what's it do? Well, typically when you have a valve like this, it actually flows better at peak lift, say at 600 or 700 lift. This one will outflow one with the back cut. And usually by, say, 6 or 7 CFM. However, the back cut that's on the valve usually flows about 10 CFM, sometimes even 20 CFM better at 3, 4, and 5. So it starts trailing off as you get in higher lifts, but it's much better in a low lift zone. And I'm not so much concerned about 1 or 2 thousandths of, 1 to 200ths of valve lift, but at 400, it's an important number to me, and the back cut helps. So in other words, the back cut actually really does make more power. And if you ask me exactly how much, it's application independent, but I'd say it's an easy 10 or 15. So that's the simple thing. You don't have to have them on the exhaust. So there's that's one thing that's going to hold it back from flow. Now, I had my assistant kind of blast these off, but I'm going to have to redo it because he didn't do a good enough job. But anyway, this is how they look. It looks like they were kind of cartridge rolled in here, which is kind of hard to see from the lighting. That's it, but it does have a ridge here. Feel that? That's where the air is going to come off this, which next to no top cut, because that's a seat. That's all the top cut you have, so that's another thing hurting it on flow. And it nails that ridge. So that's definitely not going to help flow there. Again, same thing. It just no top cut and into flatness. I don't like that. The exhaust really not as critical, but the intake for sure is. The ports itself don't look all that bad. This head's still kind of dirty. So you have to bear with me on that. And the light's not here, so I can't really show you very well, but that's kind of how it is. I'll show you the exhaust in this one. The exhaust ports are relatively small. I mean, they're okay. They're really small, to be honest with you. If you put it on a 440, I bet you that's got less area than the small block Chevys. Some of the racier ones. It's just small. So I guess these heads are awesome for torque, of course, which most people know, but they're just not big enough. I'm just not a fan. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and flow it real quick, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm flowing on a 4310 bore, and someone's gonna say, hey, Chrysler's released a 4320. You're correct. Usually they're actually larger, but I mentioned this in other videos before. Each one of these pieces cost a bunch. So let's go over here and I'll show you. The stand is about 600 bucks. That's just this piece. This bore sleeve, which is actually different sizes, that's about between 150 and 200. The slider plate that matches each cylinder head and bore is 400. So I already had a 4310 bore because I use that for big block Chevys. So to save cost, I just bought this plate at a 4310, which is slightly undersized from a 440 Mopar. I'm just bringing that up. Now you might say, why don't you get the right one? Again, I just told you the cost. This Edlebrock Perfomer RPM head is the first one of a 440 I've seen in now 10 years. So there's no return on investment for it. So there's that. Now, if you want to skip forward a few minutes, you can actually get flow numbers. But I do want to talk about this too because it gets brought up a lot. People have asked me several times, what do you think about Edelbrock heads? Well, I'm going to tell you this. I don't think they're really all that great. And I'm brand all the way through, Edelbrock heads typically are just for your basic street strip guy, with the exception of the small block Ford. See, Edelbrock's heads, like the small block Fords, they've got a Glidden Victor 7721, the GV2, the SC1, they all made excellent heads. Those ones made some serious power. But if you look at any other brands, they're just meant to be like stock replacement heads that make a few horsepower more. So if you're trying to go all out crazy, unless you got those one Ford heads I've just mentioned, or a Pro Port head, because they did make several of those, which are heads that were made for porters. And they take a lot of stuff moving around, and they cost a lot of money, and it's a lot of stuff to do. Beyond those, and they had a few little race heads in between, they're just decent. They're made for street strip stuff. And I kind of feel bad for that, because I really did love the company. The idea that a guy took off and built his own company and it succeeded. But one of the things that they're probably better for was their manifolds. And if you guys know anything since the changeover, it's been really hard to get them, and I feel bad. But in general, Edelbrock heads are just made for street strip stuff, with the exception of some Ford things. There were a few Chapman heads that they made for small block Chevys back in the day, but you can't even get those. At one time, they made a Rage Runner head for a small block Chevy, but they discontinued it without hardly making any. They also made a BV3 head for a big block Chevy, which you could never find, which was amazing. But again, they hardly ever had them. It's kind of weird, and this is a little side rant. When I look at like the Musey cars, and they run Edelbrock sponsors them, I'm always amazed by it, because I bet you there's not one piece of Edelbrock on it. Now, Edelbrock now is merged with Comp Cam, so maybe a Comp Cam might be inside of it. But there's no Edelbrock heads, there's no Edelbrock intake, there's no Edelbrock nothing. And by the way, the company itself, in some ways, was ahead of its time. For instance, the first fuel injection system I ever saw came from Edelbrock. Now, granted, it costed quite a bit, but they did make quite a bit of advancements in that. So they did a lot of stuff that was, kind of new. But their head side stuff, it looks like, just like with these, they took a factory casting and just made it in aluminum, with some minor changes. In later years, they make a few more changes, but nothing dramatic. Meanwhile, the true race heads that you would see out there winning races aren't Edelbrock, with the exception of the Pro Port stuff. So that people might say, well, that's Edelbrock. Then they go buy it and they realize this thing's not very good at all. It's because they were running the race version head that made for porters, and you didn't get that head. So in a way, they kind of blew it on that end. So anyway, that's my opinion on Edelbrock stuff, because people ask quite a bit, like, what do you think about Edelbrock heads? As far as quality, though, their quality has really been good. Of course, they've been made in America. With the exception, I will say, the last 440 RPM air head I saw, right away when I pulled it apart, the guides were extremely tight. Like, I don't know how I didn't stick a valve. But that's been a while ago. But everything else, they've always been quality. I do give them that. So anyway, that's my opinion on those. But let's get to the flow. I'm going to flow this head, and I'll show you the flow numbers. So thanks for sticking around for some of that rant. Here are the numbers. Yeah, they're kind of disappointing, but I'll go through them real quick with you. At 400, it moves 245. At 600, it's 285. And at peak, you're around 289, sorry, at 9. But you're never going to get there. But you can kind of see the port kind of levels off. That's the reason why I flow it that high. However, the numbers are really just not that good. The exhaust side, you got 400 at 172, 600 is 198, and it keeps going up to about 217. Now, this is without exhaust pipe, too. Now, some of you might say, well, that's because of that smaller bore. The smaller bore had nothing to do with it. I mean, look how far away from the bore itself it is, the valve, and nothing. That 5, because I'm flowing on a 4310, stock bore's 4320. That's 5 thousandths on each side. It's making no difference. But anyway, it just doesn't move that much air. What's going to happen whenever I put that back cut on the valve job, chances are probably what's going to happen is this number will come up maybe like a 253, 255 maybe. And these will come up, but the peak numbers will probably much stay the same without any port work. You can kind of see why these heads make a ton of torque. I mean, they got a small runner. The valve size is a 214. Before a big block, something in the 440 range, that valve is pretty small. Just to give you an idea, there's small block Chevy heads that have a 214 and bigger valves, 23 degree stuff. So this intake valve is pretty small. Now the exhaust valve though is kind of big. This is a 1810, which diameter is pretty large. And maybe I don't think it needs to be that big, but that's just my opinion. But it is what it is. But you can see why they make torque. Small runner, flow there, and you can see why they just don't make a lot of higher RPM power. Because if you're feeding anything, let's say a 440 even that's been stroked, that's not enough air. You can forget the volume and everything. I mean, that plays a part too, but the air will never let you get there. Any CFM you gain from this will gain more RPM just because it's so underfed. Anyway, that's my take on this head, and glad you guys stuck around. I do want to say, I know 440 guys are, and Chrysler guys in general are this way. You want to see more of the stuff. If you want to see more of the stuff, you got to send it in. The only reason why you saw that 440 source head and this head is because some person sent it in. If yours a head also, like you're a head porter and you're just getting started, or whoever, let's say you've got a head at all and you want it just to be evaluated, send it in. It costs $30 plus the shipping back to you for me to evaluate the head. And I'll flow it on my bench and I'll give you evaluation. I'll try to work it in between with all my other port work. I gotta get it done. But at least then you can get an idea. But if there's some heads you really want to see, you got to send them in. I just don't have customers asking for this. And I know you guys are a straight up hardcore fan base, the Chrysler guys, but there's just not a lot of you. Now, I will say, to help some of you Mopar guys out, I just got notification that Brzezinski finally, Brzezinski, by the way, is the ones that make these plates, the stand and all the stuff, the flow head, is finally sending me the bore and the plate so I can do a Gen 3, the newer Hemi heads for a Mopar. So hopefully you get to see some of that soon. They're also sending me an FE plate because I bought that as well for Fords. But anyway, there's that. Now I am going to put out, this is bonus for you guys. I am going to put out another video tomorrow because I got kind of behind on the whole putting out video things. And what I'm going to do is, this one's just an intake test. I'm going to float a bunch of head, small block Chevy stuff. I know 440 is like, great, another one. But anyway, I'm going to flow a head with a bunch of different intakes on the Superflow so I can see if it changes to swirl. And anyway, get you some ideas there. But thanks again for sticking around. There's your information about the head. It is what it is. You guys take care.